Thanks for listening to the GOSH podcast. GOSH stands for the Gynecologic Oncology Sharing Hub, an open space for real and evidence-based discussions on gynecologic cancers. We'll share the stories of gynae cancer patients and survivors and hear from researchers and clinicians who are working behind the scenes to improve the lives of people with gynecologic cancers. Our podcast is produced and recorded on the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. It is produced by the Gynecologic Cancer Initiative, a province-wide initiative in British Columbia with the mission to accelerate transformative research and translational practice on the prevention, detection, treatment, and survivorship of gynecologic cancers.
Hi, I'm Nicole Kay.
And I'm Stephanie Lamb.
And you're listening to the GOSH podcast.
Hi, I'm Elmira Jantuyakova. I do behind-the-scenes work for the GOSH podcast. Today, I'll take over Stephanie and Nicole's place as a host, and you're listening to the GOSH podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the GOSH podcast. As you can tell, we're utilizing a new format today. We're trying to also include video experience to you in addition to an audio experience, and we plan to post this podcast with this episode with Anna on the YouTube, so it would be more accessible to people. So let me introduce you Anna. So Anna is a dedicated researcher currently pursuing PhD in Women and Children's Health Sciences at UBC. She holds a bachelor's degree in Biochemistry and Molecular Biology from Trent University and a master's degree in Medical Sciences with specialization in Physiology and Pharmacology from McMaster University. Anna's academic journey has been intertwined with her personal experience having battled endometriosis for nearly 18 years. For the past 7 years, Anna has focused her research on endometriosis, emphasizing the importance of knowledge translation. She believes in the responsibility of researchers to effectively communicate their findings to those directly affected by their work, patients. Alongside her academic pursuits, Anna engages with endometriosis community through social media, sharing informative posts, raising awareness, and fostering connection. Welcome, Anna. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting. Very happy to be here.
Yay. So to start, maybe I know we talked a little bit about you already, but is there anything else you want to share about yourself?
Maybe I'll just mention that I am an international student. So I think that kind of also feeds into my background and why I do the things that I do. I do research in endometriosis. You're right, I do have personal history with this condition as well. In my spare time, I also teach as a TA. I teach the Human Anatomy and Physiology course. I also, almost everything I do somehow relates to endometriosis. So there will be classes about endometriosis or some tests, or also I work as a scientific writer for Athenia Laboratories. That's the company that also is currently working on endometriosis diagnostic test. And yes, you're right. I do enjoy spending time on social media where I share posts or write them or reshare other people's pieces, because I do believe that as scientists, it's just not enough if all you do is you perform like actual wet lab experiments, or yes, you conduct qualitative research. It's all fantastic, but if it does not get delivered to people who can actually benefit from it, then there is only partial, I think, benefit that we are actually providing.
Yeah, as you said, we'll talk about it later as well more, but yeah, as you said, delivering the information, the research that you have, the things that you have discovered to the public, I think is important, right?
Exactly.
Great, you're so multifaceted. I didn't know you do TAing and also, work with companies like in private sector. Wow, cool. Okay. Maybe, as you said, you had experience with endometriosis yourself, and can you share a little bit of that personal journey with endometriosis, and if it did, how it influenced your decision to pursue research?
Yeah, absolutely. It started very early for me. I was 11 years old. So that was the time where I would have get my first menstruation. So this is kind of very similar to what other people experience, although endometriosis is very different and it does presents itself very differently. People would have various symptoms and it's not quite the same for everyone, but it is quite common to start having menstrual periods very early and have this agonizing pain. So actually when I first got my period, I really thought I had appendicitis.
Wow.
So it was pretty bad. But and yeah, I went through the whole very stereotypical path of going to doctors and they wouldn't believe me or they would diagnose me with being a woman. So that was amazing. At the age of like 11 and then consequent years, you just keep hearing that this is what your life is supposed to be now. This is normal. This is something everybody has. But like, yes, I was young, but I wasn't, like silly. I had family, I have mother, I had at that time only one sister, I had friends and classmates, and it didn't quite, I guess, make sense in my head that how come if that's so normal, why do they not miss classes? They keep going to school, they keep going to work, they keep, going everywhere. They don't have pills on them at all points. They don't have to annoy their teachers because they have to miss yet another class, So it's just like, oh, am I actually that weak? People were talking about like low pain tolerance and things like that. I'm like, oh wow, like I must be really that probably something is bad with me. But yeah, so it took a little bit of time kind of advocating for yourself. And I think, very early on, I was quite curious and I was reading a lot about human anatomy and different conditions. At that point, I didn't know what endometriosis was and it didn't really come up. And I was, again, young and I don't think internet was really a thing just yet, at least not for my age group. But yeah, I had two things kind of going for me. It was my curiosity and this utter feeling for I have to stand up for myself. This is unfair, this kind of like unfairness, and I have to battle it. And I had lots of support from my family, which I recognize not everybody has, but this is something that has definitely shaped my experience in a more positive way. I didn't have to explain myself to my family whenever I would need to leave early from school or not go at all. My family was 100% supportive at all times. So that was great. And my mother, she helped me find different doctors. And it took many years and 6 years for us to finally get the diagnosis. So we find a doctor who was into research, although I'm glad that she told me I had endometriosis, but she was a little bit too much into endometriosis. So the second she saw me, she's like, yes, you have endometriosis. She got excited. But then she right away told me, okay, so that means you're going to be infertile at the age of 17. She told me that just right off the bat, no context, no nothing. So that was devastating. I'm not going to lie, it was devastating. I come from a very family oriented background. I was always looking up to my family who got married at 19 and had 3 children and been together ever since. I'm like, this is exactly what's going to happen to me. And then just like that at 17, you're like, okay. Yeah, so that was heartbreaking, but it took a little bit of time to process that, but again, kind of bounce back into the whole path of learning more about it and not giving up. So that's how I got really interested in medicine and gynecology. And now I actually had something to hold on to. So this definition, there is endometriosis, what can I find out about it? So that's why I then pursued some school-related activities about medicine, different placements, internships, and then as a result of all that undergraduate degree, where already there we started doing a thesis study on endometriosis, and it just kind of snowballed from there. So I haven't stopped ever since.
Oh my, that's an inspiring story, to be honest. It's at points sad because to be able to be dismissed for so many years and to have this condition since you were really a child and having to advocate for yourself and having to it's tiring, right? It's exhausting sometimes.
Absolutely.
You do
Yeah.
that as a child. You probably have your, I don't know, like your friends going around, running around and like having fun and you like have like that condition, pain.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard, but I'm also happy that you had your family support and support system because I find that not everybody probably has that. Yeah, which is great that your parents, your family trusted you and like persisted and going to the doctors and yeah, that's really a big deal as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Lucky.
Mm-hmm. You said you didn't stop since studying and researching endometriosis for the past 7 years, I imagine. Yeah. And what specific aspects of endometriosis did you do research on? Like going from your undergrad thesis and coming to your PhD now?
Yeah, I've done very different things actually. So I'm very also grateful for my experiences and my supervisors. In my undergrad, I was working on how physical activity can affect symptoms of endometriosis.
Mhm.
During my master's, I had kind of like a more pharma-related study where we were testing a new drug for endometriosis on an animal model. And then now I'm working on a qualitative research that is going to look at experiences of people with endometriosis. So how can endometriosis impact their lives? What particular category they're affected? We're going to be doing this project through a relatively new concept. It's called digital storytelling. So this is when people meet online and they co-create their stories. So they don't only tell us or they don't write about it. It's not just an interview. So people create actual stories about an impactful kind of event of their life in relations to endometriosis. And it's open to any topic of their choosing. So I'm very eager to see what comes out of this project. This is very important because there was a pilot project which did show that people were very willing to share their stories publicly. In fact, you can find all those stories on our website, and I'll share all those links with you as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, and another thing that people from the pilot project noticed was that the process of sharing and co-creating stories first and then sharing it publicly had this therapeutic benefit to them. So we are very excited to explore that now as well. And another thing that we will be also looking at is so how not only creating from the perspective of endometriosis person can affect your well-being, but also as part of the audience. If you are watching and engaging in this kind of format, how can it impact those people as well? So it's kind of it's a long-term big project. Very excited. It's I haven't done anything quite like this yet. I have a lot. I see how beneficial this can be for the wider community. Again, we'll be able to identify some of the categories that may be common themes that come up through people's experiences, and maybe we can highlight some of the knowledge translation avenues that we could find out. So whether it's work, and maybe we should be more proactive telling employers, about this condition so people get more support there. So it's going to be very multi-dimensional. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, I would imagine you would like with this setup and with this research approach, you would you open a lot of avenues. It seems like a lot of avenues for new research and see the other, yeah, more projects from that. And
Absolutely.
yeah, which is really great. And you coming from like exercise and then endometriosis research to like drug testing to qualitative research is really like you're tackling endometriosis from all the different directions, which is also really, really cool and great. Um, yeah, and I know you also do in addition to your research, you also engage in social media with community, with endometriosis community. You share informational posts, you do Instagram stories. I also follow you, so I know. Um, you share all the like useful tools and information, so which is really, really great. I also try to share with you whenever I see something
I
interesting.
know.
And
Yes, thank you.
yeah, you are the person to go. Because of you, I am the person without endometriosis can educate myself about that. Because before, I'm also a PhD student at UBC. I also study women's health, but I haven't really heard about, and then honestly, to be honest, before joining UBC and before maybe talking to you more and hearing about the research that your group is doing. So yeah, for sure, I am more educated about endometriosis because of you.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, which is great. And about that, so I was going to ask you a question about how do you see the role of social media about raising awareness about endometriosis and fostering connection with the endometriosis community?
Yeah, I think social media is very powerful. Definitely very important because you can get information right now and very quickly, very efficiently. In that perspective, I think, yeah, social media is great, whichever app you choose to use. You're right about the sense of community. I think this is something I was lacking because until I started really researching endometriosis, I wouldn't know that they're like it's so common, and like I didn't know anybody with endometriosis. People don't really talk about their pain, about their periods, especially. It's stigmatized. We don't talk about that, never. But social media can also be dangerous because of misinformation, and also I find because of this constant flow of information. So I think people should just be very cautious and maybe limit their use because there needs to be a balance between finding useful information, finding the support group, finding, sometimes there's so many memes right now about endometriosis too, and like it's great, but I think even for myself, as much as I think I do this professionally now, I know how to kind of separate personal from professional. But if you submerge yourself too deep into this and have this constant reminder of your already chronic pain, it can also have devastating effects. So it's important to draw the line so it doesn't really impact your mental health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So basically not to
Overdo it.
overdo it, yeah, and not like there is a danger of like it penetrating to different aspects of your life and trying to limit it to a.
I
Mhm.
I don't think there are studies on that yet, so maybe this is something I can do next. But I like just speaking of personal experience here, I do believe that social media can also have a very dangerous impact on our well-being.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, all this anxiety, maybe my mom actually always send me the posts about like, oh, don't do this, this is dangerous, don't eat this food. Oh, you have this pain, it can be this, all this scary sort of videos and yeah, and sort of not professionals. We don't know about their credential and what they're talking about, which yeah, it also can be like it also can bring up like anxiety. So yeah, as you said, everybody, I would even say, even so, the people with chronic conditions should be more selective in terms of their, yeah, social
Absolutely.
media consumption. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know you also mentioned about misconceptions a little bit here, that social media um, can have some misconception about diseases. And what are some of the common misconceptions about endometriosis that you encountered in social media or throughout your like journey with endometriosis and being a researcher? Yeah.
So definitely there's lots of misinformation in social media and in our just, I guess, communal knowledge. Mostly it's around definition of the disease, what's the treatment, what's the perfect strategy for diagnosis. And in all fairness, as dangerous as this is, I have absolutely zero tolerance for posts or like stories, whatever that is, about anything that has to do with blaming people with endometriosis, as in like, oh, you've done this in your life, that's why you have endometriosis, or you haven't done this yet, like, I don't know, try this gluten-free diet, and that's why you still have endometriosis. No. And I want to make this very clear that there is nothing you have done to have endometriosis. There is nothing you could have done to prevent it in the first place. And your journey can become better through different treatments and different supplementary techniques. But ultimately, it is very difficult to get rid of this disease. And it is always great to have your best interest always in mind and to kind of proceed the path to recovery. But it is not your fault. And people, especially, I find that for some reason, maybe because English-speaking kind of resources are a little bit more informed at this point, I see less and less English-speaking kind of posts about this, about blaming people. But yeah, I also have, I speak Russian, right? So some Russian-speaking posts just sometimes really, really make me angry. And I do repost those and I flag them and I complain about them. It is not okay. Yeah, those people would claim that some kind of diets or exercises, they will cure your endometriosis. And just because the pain is in your head, you should get pregnant. That's another one. That's a favorite one. Another advice people try to give, unsolicited advice to people, or it's a career-driven disease, and that's why you still have endometriosis. I don't know why we have to talk about this in 21st century. This is ridiculous. It's a condition. It's a painful condition for some people. It is very multifactorial, and it affects, yes, in some people, fertility. It affects gastrointestinal symptoms. Painful sex is associated with endometriosis as well. People have very different symptoms. They have done absolutely nothing to have this condition. And in addition to constantly advocating for themselves in terms of finding the right doctor, finding the right diagnosis, they also, for some reason, have to advocate that it isn't their fault. I think it's just very heartbreaking that this is something people have to go through in addition to everything they're already going through on a daily basis.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is also, there is a lot of cultural differences still in terms of I'm coming from Kazakhstan and I haven't ever heard of endometriosis, which is also one point. And yeah, and how the information is delivered, yeah, it's quite different. And I'm liking that there is a shift, at least in the English language posts, and the English speaking community, at least, that there is that it's not the patient's fault. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. Thanks sharing with that misconception. We will keep that in mind. And I think it's very encouraging for the individuals who are listening to us with endometriosis or have suspicions about endometriosis. Yeah, I think it's really important to hear. And is there any maybe other advice or resources would you recommend to help people, a person who is diagnosed with endometriosis, to help deal with the complexities of the disease?
Yeah, I would say if you already have a diagnosis, then so you at least you know what endometriosis is. So I would actually suggest a book which is called The Doctor Will See You Now by Dr. Tamer Seckin from US. It's a great book, really kind of putting everything together, some of the common symptoms, some of the common treatments and diagnoses. It kind of presents endometriosis through stories of other people. So I think that book did a really good job kind of summarizing it, and also, again, communicating that it isn't your fault, the pain is not in your head. I think it's a great resource for validation. Some of the feelings people have probably collected over the time by the time they got the diagnosis. I would suggest always listening to your body. You know your body, and you know how you react to different diets. If this is something you would like to pursue as a supplemental strategy. And also, once you do find a doctor that you trust, they will probably suggest different treatment strategies. So do trust the doctor that you chose, and give them a chance to try out different treatments, whether it's medication or anything else, different supplemental modalities, but then ultimately also listen to your body, because yes, it takes, especially if we're talking about some hormonal medication, it takes a while for the body to adjust. So don't maybe say no immediately. Take some time, give yourself a little bit of time to adjust, but then ultimately you listen to yourself, because you will know whether you need a different dose, a different mode of delivery. You know best your body. And obviously, maybe some of the other things ultimately, just to help alleviate some of the symptoms. This is not to say that this is going to treat endometriosis pain, no, but some people have found some supporting self-management techniques useful. And this could be through diet, through exercise, pelvic floor physiotherapy, acupuncture, therapist. So again, I'm not saying you need therapists because this is in your head. I'm just saying that endometriosis is associated with many other conditions, and some of the supplementary techniques may be useful for some people.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and as you mentioned about like the mental health aspect of it is really crucial when you like have a chronic condition, really any chronic condition, especially even more that dealing with the pain, right? It can bring up some difficulties also mentally, which is, yeah, great point that you mentioned that. And thank you. So another, I think, thing I wanted to talk about was about healthcare professionals. You mentioned that, oh, there is some healthcare professionals that would say that's in your head, or some that are not aware about endometriosis, while others can be really proactive. And yeah, which there are different kinds of like healthcare professionals. And I was wondering how can general public and maybe more importantly healthcare professionals better support individuals with endometriosis?
First and foremost, I would say acknowledging the pain and condition and being more informed about it is step number one. Because, yeah, people have reported that although they wouldn't, like, it's very difficult, right? That the treatment for endometriosis typically involves surgery, but just the fact that you are getting some kind of a definitive diagnosis, it already helps greatly. Just so, again, to kind of understand and that you're not going crazy. And again, like you're being validated. So acknowledgement is number one. Another thing would be, so I think what we're doing now, like running different campaigns, those are very crucially important as well. Canada is very proactive and working on the national plan, which is supposed to secure some funds for the research activities for support for people with endometriosis. I think, yeah, some of the other people I think you may invite for the podcast as well will talk about their specific projects, which are also great. And we're working specifically on educating and raising awareness in the next generation of healthcare providers. So this is something great that's in the works, that's going on. And again, I believe that the project I am currently working on will also support raising awareness with the healthcare providers and the wider community as well.
That's great. And what about general public? Let's say your friends, your like someone, yeah, it's also I think important, right? When you like to be maybe more informed about the disease is one thing, but how can maybe someone physically support or yeah, the person with endometriosis?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So there is the Endometriosis Network Canada, and they have different social media platforms, and they do talk about the role of the partner as well and the community. And there's just so much on social media. So just like, like people reshare in their posts, I think that's something that's already great. But also some of the other works that has been a result of hard work of my current lab is, so they're educating people in schools. And so it's both like boys and girls, and just so like what is normal kind of period, what is endometriosis. I think this is very important as well. And I think we can talk a lot about changing global things, about changing, national campaigns and funding and school curriculum. But I think where it really should start is at your own home. When you're talking to your children, when you're talking to your parents, we tend to talk about big things and it's great. And even that, I think, maybe I'm biased because I am in research. Maybe I speak about this with my family, but it's the cancer predispositions and risk factors, right? Maybe some other people don't even talk about that. But other conditions, especially stigmatized as endometriosis, people don't talk about that. So you wouldn't even know if your grandmother had it, if your mother, maybe she's suffering in silence and she would never tell you. So I think my personal advice would be to open up those conversations with your family, with your children, with your parents, with relatives, and just it's great to be informed about what has been going on in family medical history. It's your information, and then you don't have to share it with anyone, but your children, when they start experiencing something like this, it's much faster to get the right diagnosis if you've been informed that this is something that has been going on, in fact, in your family. So I think we can all start making a little difference already today.
So starting those conversations and talking about it. Yeah, as you said, is also taboo, right? To talk about periods. People still are uncomfortable about all these things, but we should do it. It's really helpful and empowering, I would believe, for people with conditions, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it would be our last question is going to be about the future of endometriosis care, and you yourself, researcher, advocate, and patient living with the condition. How do you envision the future of endometriosis care, and what do you think is essential to improving overall landscape for the patients?
I think it would be great if tomorrow we developed a test to diagnose it, and then the day after tomorrow a pill, and just to treat endometriosis, and we all lose our jobs and go on fantastic retirements. But it's probably going to take a little bit longer than that. It is definitely a multi-step approach that we all have to take. I'm very glad to see this improvements in healthcare providers' education. We're raising awareness, both in professional circles and as you said, the community as well. I think I'm seeing personally quite a bit of change just in the landscape, and I know how algorithms work with social media, but I think there is just generally many more of those support groups online. They used to not exist, so I feel like in the last couple 5 years at least, I feel like there is a lot of change going on. There are national, international symposiums that are talking about endometriosis, so I think we are going in the very right direction. But again, I would start from the family and your local community. I think this is great. And another thing that everyone can do already to change the landscape a little bit is just be kind to people. You never know what they're going through, whether it's endometriosis or not, to be honest.
Right.
You never know what kind of situation they're going through, what health condition they have. Try not to judge and be very supportive, and just be kind and don't assume anything.
Yeah, that's great. That's great that you mentioned a big picture, ideal world, but also the small steps that everybody can do, which is really great, which you also did for the support that we can provide for endometriosis community, yeah, which we all can do as well. Yes, that's great. I think we can, yeah, that was our last question, and thank you so much for sharing all all your experiences and your personal life and your research. Thanks for doing all the work, and thanks for advocating for the people for these conditions, which is, I think it's really important. And thanks again. I will link all the resources that you mentioned in the show notes. And yeah, and this is the series about endometriosis. So we will be hearing more from Anna's colleagues, Dr. Paul Young, Dr. Natasha Orr in the future. So yeah, stay tuned, and thanks for listening.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Gosh podcast. To learn more about the Gynecologic Cancer Initiative and our podcast, make sure to check out our website at gynecancerinitiative.ca.